3 minutes ago, something happened in the congressional chamber that made even Washington's most seasoned reporters look at each other. Thomas Massie stood at the podium. In his hands were official documents extracted from FBI's own files. And these documents were about to demolish everything Patel had testified under oath that very morning. When Massie began speaking, his voice was calm, precise, and merciless. "Director Patel," he said, "there are at least 20 names in these files. You know these names. The FBI knows them. And today, everyone in this room is going to learn them." Patel's face changed in 2 seconds. That confident, rehearsed expression vanished. Something else took its place. The calculating look a man makes when he's cornered. And Massie began opening his documents. But for me to fully explain this moment to you, you need to go back a few minutes. Because this hearing wasn't just an interrogation session. This was the moment when a truth hidden for years was trying to surface. And at the center of that truth were Jeffrey Epstein victim statements, FBI's own FD 302 documents, and a list of names never shared with the public. If you're discovering this channel for the first time, subscribe now and turn on notifications. Because this story doesn't end with this video. There's a new development every day, and you'll find all of them here.
In peace. That list also includes at least 19 other individuals, one Hollywood producer worth a few $100 million, one royal prince, one high-profile individual in the music industry, one very prominent banker, one high-profile government official, one high-profile former politician, one owner of a car company in Italy, one rock star, one magician, at least 6 billionaires, including a billionaire from Canada. We know these people exist in the FBI files, the files that you control. I don't know exactly who they are, but the FBI does. Have you launched any investigations into any of these people, and have you seen these 302 documents?
Now, let's go back to that morning. Date, January 2026, Tuesday morning. House Judiciary Committee Oversight Hearing. Patel arrived right on time. With him were 2 FBI attorneys, a press advisor, and a thick folder. He had learned from previous hearings. He was ready for every question. He had an answer for every trap. At least, that's what he thought. The first 90 minutes went exactly as he expected. Cybersecurity questions, Chinese espionage reports, budget projections. Patel handled each one easily. Professional, measured, just vague enough. On the opposite side of the room sat Thomas Massie, silently, waiting, looking at his folder. When Massie's turn came, it was 2 in the afternoon. "Director Patel," Massie began, his voice flat and direct. "I want to remind you of the question Senator Kennedy asked you in the Senate yesterday. Kennedy asked you whether Epstein trafficked victims to anyone else, and you said, as recorded in the transcript, there is no credible information that he trafficked them to anyone else." Patel nodded. "Yes, that was an honest assessment." Massie slowly leaned forward. "Then I want to talk to you about the FBI's own documents, specifically the FD 302 documents produced from the 2019 New York case file." Patel's left hand came down on the table, a small movement, but for careful observers, a sufficient signal. "These documents," Massie continued, holding up the pages in his hand, "are in FBI possession, in your possession. And according to victims who cooperated with the investigation, these documents detail at least 20 men to whom Jeffrey Epstein trafficked victims." The room was freezing. There was no movement. Journalists stopped writing. Senators stopped looking at their phones. Everyone was looking at Patel. "One of these names," Massie continued, "is Jess Staley, the former CEO of Barclays Bank." Patel's expression didn't move a muscle, but his left hand pressed down on the table a bit more. "And on this list," Massie said, not raising his voice but emphasizing every word, "there are many more names. A Hollywood producer worth a few $100 million, a member of a royal family, someone well known in the music world, a very prominent banker, a high-profile government official, a retired high-profile politician, the owner of an Italian car company, a rock star, a magician, and at least 6 billionaires, one of them from Canada." Each name category drew a reaction from the room. Whispers, chair creaks. Someone coughed. "These people are in FBI files, Director Patel, in files under your control. I don't know exactly who they are, but the FBI does." Massie closed his folder, looked at Patel. "Have you launched any investigation into any of these people?" Patel had prepared his answer, but he still hesitated for a moment. That momentary hesitation was zoomed in by the cameraman on the left. Senator, I have asked my FBI agents to review the entirety of the Epstein files and bring forward any credible information. We are working with Congress, and any credible investigation that emerges will be shared with you. So far, no new material has come before me that would lead to a new indictment. Massie nodded slowly, like a teacher patiently waiting to hear the wrong answer. I see, he said. So the logic here is the victims aren't credible? Or the FD 302 documents didn't produce credible statements that would establish probable cause?
Patel immediately corrected.
That's not my assessment. That's the conclusion reached by 2 different U.S. attorneys' offices from 3 separate administrations after reviewing the same materials. Well, Massie said, have you personally read those FD 302 documents? Those documents where victims name those who harmed them? A brief silence. I personally don't know, but the FBI has. Massie leaned forward. You're the FBI director, but you haven't personally read the documents where the FBI read about victims naming their abusers. And you went to the Senate and said, there's no credible information. That sentence hung in the air. Patel wanted to say something. His mouth opened. But one of his lawyers leaned forward slightly. Patel stopped. Multiple authorities, Patel continued, have looked at everything we have. Okay, Massie said. Then I'll ask something different. He pulled out a new page. Regarding whether victims will cooperate with the FBI as witnesses, have you investigated whether the CIA has a file on Epstein? Patel returned to prepared ground. I can speak for the FBI. Assuming the CIA has a file and it hasn't yet been shared with us, the FBI will look at any new investigative lead. You used the word assuming, Massie said. So you don't know whether the CIA has an Epstein file? I'm the FBI director. I can't make statements on behalf of the CIA. Massie tilted his head slightly. You know Alex Acosta said this, right? I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone. A former U.S. official says he was told to drop the case. Doesn't that make you curious? Patel's answer was ready. I'm aware of historical claims. The FBI conducts investigations based on available information. Historical claims, Massie repeated, in a flat voice. No emphasis, but those 2 words echoed in the room. And then it turned in an unexpected direction. Director Patel, I have another question about documents we submitted under the Freedom of Information Act. These documents show that some materials in the Epstein files were about to be released to the public, but were then re-restricted. How were these decisions made? Patel answered, but his response was almost inaudible, because the room was already starting to talk about something else. Because Massie's next question was going in a different direction than everyone expected. Director Patel, he said, you had a meeting with social media influencers. You showed them victim bulletins. These people were in a position to benefit financially from these stories. But will you agree to meet with the victims themselves? Will you personally meet with them? Patel's answer was almost automatic. The FBI will meet with anyone who has new information. Will you personally meet with them? The professionals handling the cases in the FBI, I'm asking about you, as the director. Will you sit down and talk to them face to face? A brief pause. The FBI's relevant experts will handle the cases. Massie nodded. He didn't press further, because the answer had already been given. And right at that moment, Massie played his final card. He held up the last page in his hand, toward the camera. This, he said, is an unsigned memorandum dated July 2025. It bears the emblem of the Department of Justice and the FBI, and it says, we did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties. Unsigned, Massie repeated. An official document bearing the Department of Justice and FBI emblem. Unsigned. Patel said nothing. This document appears to be a justification document for not opening investigations into the 20 people named by victims, Massie said. But no one wants to sign it. The room descended into that heavy silence again. Patel looked at the table, looked at his lawyers, then back at Massie. And what he said was perhaps the most honest thing he said in this hearing. Senator, I cannot give you more information on this matter right now. Massie closed his folder, leaned back in his chair. Director Patel, he said, I want to tell you one last thing. When you leave this room, victims' families were watching this hearing. They lost their daughters. They fought for years. And you said here today that not a single investigation has been opened into 20 people whose names appear in the FBI's own documents. You said there's no credible evidence, but you haven't read those documents yourself. A deliberate pause. You know how that looks. Patel didn't answer. He couldn't. The hearing technically continued. Other questions were asked. Budget numbers, counterterrorism updates, but no one was listening. Everyone was trying to digest what had just happened.
Because Massie had just done something very simple. He hadn't used complex legal language. He hadn't advanced grand theories. He had simply taken the FBI's own documents, used Patel's own words, and showed the gap between them. Victim statements exist. Names exist. Documents exist. And there are no investigations. This simple truth left the room that day, spread to social media, and within a few hours was on the agenda of every news platform. If you've watched this story this far, I want one thing. Share this video with one person, just one person, because this kind of information only reaches where it needs to go when it's shared. When Patel left the room, he was talking to his lawyers, in a low voice, quickly. The cameras followed him. His face was closed. The professional mask was in place. But that mask hadn't held completely for 3 hours and 47 minutes, and the cameras had recorded every moment. The question Massie asked is now on record. These files are in the FBI. These names are in the FBI. These victim statements are in the FBI. There are no investigations. Why? This question still has no answer. Maybe it never will, or maybe it will come at the next hearing, when the next document is released, when the next victim speaks. But one thing is certain. They can't say there are no files anymore. They can't say there are no names. Massie made that impossible today. And that was just the beginning. If you want to follow every development on this channel, subscribe, turn on notifications, because this story isn't over. It's just begun. Sometimes the most powerful question is the simplest one. Thomas Massie didn't advance fancy theories today. He didn't leak secret documents. He simply took the FBI's own files and asked, why are there no investigations into these people? Patel couldn't answer, because there is no good answer to this question. And in that room, at that moment, something became clear to both victims and the powerful. Silence no longer counts as an answer. Accountability is coming. Slowly, but it's coming.